So, hello! Hopefully you have now got my video and my audio and you can see and you can hear everything that is going on. And what we are going to do is we are going to run through today the basics of DaVinci Resolve and all the ins and outs of how to use the sort of basics, how to get started, how to start a new project, and how to bring your video clips into that project. I'm going to just come over here and create a new project for you, and we will start entirely from scratch. Okay, so when we're putting the video together, the first thing then that we need to do is we need to open up a folder and generate a folder structure so that we can keep tabs on all our videos, so we know what's going on, what's coming in, what's going out. Particularly at the minute, as churches are making more and more videos, you're going to very quickly find that you're going to get loads of resources all piling up, and it's very very easy to lose track of those resources that you have. Excuse me. So what we're going to do is create a folder structure, and I would suggest something like this where you can clearly see what's going on from each week, each day, whenever you're putting your videos out. Make a folder for that day with the name and the date on there, and then inside there we can break up all our folders into sections, so the worship, the sermon, other bits and pieces that you might be using, however you're going to do it, whatever is going to work for you. Just make sure you have a clean, clear structure of where all your bits are going so you can keep tracks of everything from the beginning. Now, once we have organized all that and we've got everything that we need in the right places, we can then open up our project in DaVinci Resolve. And we need to do one of two things from the beginning. Either we need to go in and we need to set all our settings manually, or we need to drag and drop our files of our clips onto the software. But when we do that, we need to remember that we then can't go back and reset those settings. Now, normally, probably the easiest way to do this is just to drag and drop your files in there, because whatever files you have to use, they're probably going to be the right settings, so that if you just drop them into the timeline will match what you have and will make everything all work to that standard. However, if you know that you need to change it to something specific ahead of time, go in and do that from the very beginning, because once you do this, you cannot go in and change it. So I'm going to grab these are our worship tracks, drag them, drop them into the media pool, and when we do that, it says the clips have different frame rate from that of the project settings. Do you want to change them or do you want to leave them? Now, if we've gone in and deliberately set those up to what we wanted them to be, you could click don't change and it will stay as you'd set it. But because we haven't set anything and we want it just to automatically set to what we had, we're going to click change on here. And then now we go to file and project settings, and I'll just show you where these settings would be. So file and project settings, this is where we can set frame rates and resolutions. All of this is in here. And once, as I say, once you've put some files in there, this then becomes grayed out up here. We can't now access that. That is fixed and set, and there's nothing we can do about it. You have to start an entire new project in order to go and change that. So that's why you need to just make sure from the very beginning you know what frame rate you're working with and whether your clips are in the right frame rate. Probably, as I say, the easiest thing is just to take them as they are, drop them in, and let the timeline sort itself out. Just click that change button and it will change everything to suit what you already have. And that's the easiest way to work normally. So we can add our worship clips in, we can add our sermon clip in. Oh, try again, add the sermon clip in, and we can add these others. We've got a communion clip and a countdown timer here as well. So we're going to drag all of those in, drop them over into our media pool, So we've got on the left hand side here our media pool window open. And maybe now's a good time just to have a quick hunt through the software, and I can take you through the sections of the software and you can see what we have going on here. So in the software here we have various tabs along the bottom here that allow us to do a few different things. So the first one is media. We can bring media into here. If you have media stored somewhere on your computer, you can just use the navigation system here to find where that media is and bring it in from here. However, I tend to use everything in this window, the edit window, because actually you can pretty much do 90% of what you're going to want to do in the edit window. You don't need to go anywhere else. So we can just drag and drop our clips into here, and then we can just stay in this tab. We don't have to go anywhere else. But just so that we can go through the rest of them, I'll show you what they all are. There's Fusion. Fusion is some fairly complex animation-y type stuff. You're very unlikely to ever need to really use Fusion unless you really want to go to town and do some fancy stuff. Color tab is where you do any color grading, and we're not going to get onto that tonight, but hopefully in the coming weeks we'll be able to move on to look at color grading. Then you've got your Fairlight tab, which is audio settings and any audio edits that you might need to do. And again, we will look at that in the coming weeks as we get onto some more advanced stuff. And the final one is this tab here, which is the one for exporting your video at the very end. Once you've made everything, all your edits, everything all sorted and as you want it to be, that's where you're going to deliver that video, where you're going to export it out. So as I say, 90% of what we need to do is going to be done in the edit window here. So we will, in fact, I'm going to bring this up here so I can see it a bit more clearly. There we go. So what we're going to do is we are going to start by adding things into our timeline. And how we do that is we drag and drop. So we're going to start off with a countdown timer, drag it and drop it, and you can see as soon as we do that, it's just generated 2 new tracks for us. So we've got a video track here at the top and our audio track on the bottom. And if I hit play on this, hopefully that's coming through for you. Again, maybe just chuck in the chat if that's working. I think my audio has gone with the audio settings that I changed. But anyway, hopefully there's some audio there for you. So once we've dropped these onto the timelines, we have up here some zoom in and zoom out arrows that we can use, and this will reduce the scale on our timeline so we can see more of it, so we can see a bit more of what's going on if we do that. The other thing with all these bits at the top, there's a bunch of panels on the left hand side and a bunch of panels on the right hand side which we can add and take away as and when we need them. So once we're done with our media pool, we can actually turn that off, which again just enables us to see more of our timeline. And all of these tabs along the top, you have ones on the right hand side and tabs on the left hand side, and they can all just be turned on and off, so we can see the bits that we need to see at any given time. So once you've taken clips out of the media pool, drop them onto your timeline, you can then turn your media pool off if you wanted to, which enables you to just see more of your timeline. So we've got a 15-minute countdown timer, and the reason I've got a 15-minute countdown timer is because if you're exporting up to YouTube, YouTube only allows you to start videos with 15-minute increments. So if you're exporting a video to upload to YouTube and you want to put a countdown timer at the beginning, if you say, for example, you want your service to start at 10:30, YouTube only allows you to schedule videos to start in 15-minute intervals. So you could do 10 o'clock, 10:15, 10:30. So you need to have a 15-minute or multiples of 15-minute timers in order for it to work with the timings that YouTube allows you to use. Hopefully that makes sense. So 15-minute timer, we can set our video to go live from 10:15 on YouTube, and then we'll have our custom countdown timer with church logos and whatever other text you want to put on there. You can put all that together and drop that in, and also put your own music underneath that as well, so you can have some Christian worship music on the background as people are getting ready for starting the church service in the morning. So we start dropping our clips in. We have our countdown timer, and we're going to move into some of these worship tracks. So let's take Goodness of God, for example, and I'm going to need to reduce this down again so we can get back over there. So we take Goodness of God, and we're going to drop that in after our timeline. Now, at the minute, this is just going to cut straight from one to the other. Now we can use our sideways arrows. You're not going to be able to see this on the keyboard, but on my keyboard here, I'm using the left and right side arrows to move through one frame at a time along this timeline. And you can see as I move left, as I'm moving kind of backwards down the timeline, we have a whole load of black, and that's because the end of this countdown timer clip has no video on it. The video ends a few seconds before we get to the very end of the clip. So I don't know whether this is coming through for you now or not. Let me just turn the volume up on the thing. So you can see there where the video dropped out. The audio is still playing underneath that at the minute, or should be. And let me just sort that out just to make sure we've got audio, because that's going to be quite helpful. Okay, so hopefully there'll be some audio here now. Looks like that could be some audio on there. Yeah, I don't have audio anymore, but there looks like there's some audio there, so hopefully you can now hear that. So, what happens at the end of this clip, as I say, we have our video running up. Just skip on a bit. So 4, 3, 2, 1. The text coming in. Good morning, church. Here we go. And then the audio carries on, but the video stops. And what we need to do is find that point where our video disappears, because obviously we don't want to ever go to a blank screen. And so using the left and right arrows here, just flicking through to find that frame where the video goes. So if I go right, it disappears. Left one frame, there it is, there's our video. Now there's a couple of ways that we could do this. First of all, the easiest thing we could do is to take our video for the Great Things track, and if we just lift it up, what has automatically happened is it creates a new track, and we can now drag this video forwards to that point. So once our countdown timer finishes, the video for Great Things is just going to start straight away. We get no black. Now the downside, I suspect with this isn't really going to work very well here. Normally with this countdown timer, what I would expect is for there to be somebody talking to then introduce the worship. You wouldn't just go straight into that song like that. So what I would normally use this particular countdown timer for is to then lead into somebody talking, and that music at the end of the countdown timer can just become a bed underneath their talking as they carry on talking over the top. With this, I don't think that's going to work very well, because you're going to get the worship music coming straight in over the top of the countdown music, so those two things are going to clash. But unfortunately there's not a lot we can do with that, just because of the clips that we have to hand right now. But hopefully that would be one way that you could work that. Another way you could do it is if you right click on your track, the very bottom of the list here you have a box that says link clips, and we can unlink those two clips. And so what we can do, at the minute we've got this snap tool on. This here indicates the snap tool, which means if I click on the playhead somewhere at the end of this clip, it will just automatically snap to the end of that clip. That's quite, at times it can be really helpful, at times it can be really frustrating. It's worth knowing that you can turn that on and off up here. But right now it's quite useful because we know that that was the last frame where the countdown timer finished. Now we've unlinked these two clips, we can deal with them independently. So our audio runs on right to the end, and in fact actually if we, in this settings menu here, we can actually turn on our audio waveforms. And we can see a bit more of what's actually going on with that track. So we know that here our playhead is at the end, the last frame, which has some video on it on the countdown timer. And if I hit B, the letter B on the keyboard, I can get this tool, the blade tool. And again, because we've got the snap tool on, this is going to snap straight to the playhead. So if I just hover somewhere in the region of the playhead and click, it's going to cut it on the playhead exactly where that line was. It's just going to snap straight to that. The letter A on the keyboard now turns that off, and I can just select that little bit of the video and we can remove that section of video. Now with these two things it doesn't matter too much because the video isn't in kind of sync with the audio. It doesn't matter that we have the ability to freely move those two things around. However, if we were to do the same thing for the worship and separate those two out so they were free to move, you can actually cause yourself some problems if you're not careful by moving one and not the other, and your worship could end up out of sync with the people who are singing, and likewise with a sermon or something like that, where it's important that what you hear and what you see sync up. You need to try and make sure that you don't lose track of that. So if you have separated things out, once you've done any editing that you might want to do, you might then want to just select those two things again, just draw a box over those two bits and it will select those two, and we can right click again and we can link those clips together again, and then we know that they're going to stick together and both move together if we did ever move anything. And you can link more than that together, so we can select all of those things. If we're now happy with the position of those two tracks in relation to each other, we can select all four of those things and link all four of those together. But once we've done that, if we then unlink all of those, now what's going to happen is nothing is going to be linked to anything else. It unlinks everything all the way through that chain. So all of these are now 4 independent tracks. So again, just be very careful with that. Just be aware if you're going to link and unlink things, make sure you know which bits you've linked and which bits you haven't, because if you start pulling one thing, you can end up all out of time with yourself. So we've moved then from our countdown timer into our first worship track. And we can do similar kind of things with our second worship track. So we can put this in, because we've now started a second track on here, we can put this back in on the first track, and either we can just butt it up to the end, and if we just zoom in on this, we can see what happens at the end. So here at the end of the worship track, you can see on the waveform how this drops down. This waveform is showing you basically volume levels across this section of the video. The volume here gets louder, but then it slowly gets quieter and quieter and quieter. So it's kind of this natural fade out at the end of this song. So you could either just let that song fade out completely, and then you can chuck your second track straight on the end of that, and we can just move from one track straight into the next one. I'm not sure with these videos whether there's no video fade out on that. It just moves straight from one to the other, which is fine. That's nothing wrong with that sometimes. So either we can just butt them together, run from one to the other, and that can work. The other thing we can do is again just pull this slightly further forward, so as this track is fading out here, we can then bring this second song in and almost kind of crossfade those two tracks together just a little bit at the end, and it can just make the transition from one to the other a little bit smoother. Sometimes it does depend on the clip and does depend on the songs and how that would work, but it's worth knowing this technique because sometimes it can be helpful. So again here, what we're probably going to want to do is to unlink those and move them, because at the minute what's going to happen with the video is we're going to see the end of that track while the second track starts to play over the top of it. So we will probably want to see the start of the second track even if the audio from that other one's running out. So what we're going to do is we're going to unlink these two, and I'm going to show you a different technique this time as to how to move the end of your audio clip. So you can hit your B tool, get your blade tool and just chop that bit out, but I'm going to show you a different way to do this. The other way you can do it is if you move your cursor to the end of that track, what you'll see is a couple of little tools that appear. Now if I stay within my track and move towards the end, I get this little tool with a couple of little arrows on it. But if I keep moving a little bit further, I get two little curves with two little arrows either side, and they do two slightly different things. So the first one, this one on its own, gives you the ability to drag the end of this clip and pull it backwards and forwards to a position wherever you want it, so you can pull it to there and snap it to there. But when you've got the two clips, the two little parentheses, brackets, things either side with the two little arrows, what that will actually do is if you had another clip butted up to it, you can actually stretch both clips at the same time. So if you want to move two clips sort of slightly further forwards or slightly further backwards, either way, you can grab that and it will just pull both of the ends of the two clips and stretch them forwards or stretch them backwards as far as the clip will allow. So if I try and take that back now, it will only take me as far as that, and then it goes red because it says you can't go any further than that because there's no video that exists beyond that point. So you can only do it within the realms of the extent of the video clip. But it can be quite a helpful way just to be able to grab that and pull it forwards to snap again to that point. So when we get to the end of that video there, play that last few seconds and the video moves straight on to where the new audio is coming in from. So two ways you can do that, same job, two different ways it can happen, and either can work. And sometimes depending on how your video is functioning and how it is working, one of those techniques might be better than the other. So that is a look through the getting the videos clips in and then bringing them down to the timeline, creating new tracks on our timeline. We can also name these. It can be quite helpful to put names on tracks, and sometimes what I tend to do when I'm doing my videos is actually I probably wouldn't put the worship on the same track as the countdown timer. So I would actually create a countdown. I would actually create a track almost for each section of the video, so I know, it just kind of helps you to keep track as to which bits of the video are where and where they all are. So we can name one of them countdown. I would often just name them worship 1 and worship 2 if I've got two tracks for my worship, and then I can, as I've said, sort of cross fade from one to the other and do things with them. So I'll have worship 1, worship 2, and then another track for things like sermon and things. So if we now bring the sermon track in, I'll show you another reason why we'll do it that way as well, because when we come into the audio settings later on, it makes even more sense that we do it this way. Now all these sections of the screen here are all movable, so we can stretch bits up and down as we need to if we want to see more or less of certain sections of the window. Again, we can just pull bits. Might not be able to move that one. No, I can't move that one. Don't know if I can if I turn that bit off. No, okay. So we can certainly move things up and down, and we can turn those bits on and off if we wanted to create more space that way. So let's now move our sermon in. and this time we're going to create another new track, so we're just going to put it up again above the worship one, and we've now got the sermon on another new track here. Now we can see on the waveform here that there is no audio for the entire beginning of this clip, and this actually is a talk that came from an online conference thing a few weeks ago. So the beginning of this is just a still image. So what again we're going to do is just use the sideways arrows left and right to scroll through to find that final frame. So that's it. So if I move right one frame now, Stuart comes in, and I move left, we get the image back up again. So we can see exactly where the beginning of that starts. We're going to hit B for our blade tool this time and chop the end of that off, and then A to turn the blade tool off again, letter A, and then we can hit the backspace key to delete that. Now this time what I'm going to do, because we're moving from one section of our service into another, so we're moving from worship into the sermon, actually what I would do at this point is this would be the time where I would use a fade out on the video. So here what I'm going to do is, again, if we move the cursor, hopefully this is all visible and you can see all this okay. If I move the cursor up to the top right hand corner of my video clip, and the same with the audio clip actually, what you get is this little white blob that turns up in the corner, and if you grab that and pull it forwards, that creates a fade out on our video. So if I now play that in from there, we'll see the video fade, and the same with the audio. So it often works best to try and match the number of seconds and frames that you fade in and out for. So it's worth noting how much of a fade you put in on one. So we're 114, 115, one frame here or there won't make too much of a difference. So we go to 114 there as well. It tends to work nicer to have equal fade in on the two, or fade out, sorry, on the two parts of that fade out audio and video together. And we're just going to have a fade out of that one to a fade in here on Stuart, and we can butt those two together, and then we move up to the top left hand corner this time and we create our fade in. Now he does start speaking very quickly here. We can see the waveform suddenly turns up here, so maybe let's just put 5 frames on this fade in here. But actually we can, oh, didn't mean to do that, we can just leave a small gap between those two, so we can put sort of 13 frames there. So as this fades out, we actually have black just for a second before it fades back in again. And if we can't put a big fade in on those clips that side, it can sometimes be helpful just to create a little bit of space. Sorry, I'm just going to get a drink. A little bit of space before you come in on your next clip there. So we can just leave a little bit of blank space. And then we can move from one section into the next section. So we can move from that into our sermon. So hopefully everybody is all still with me and this is all still working okay. What I'm now going to do is I'm just going to see if I can find a bit of the video. It doesn't really matter where we do this actually.
And I found it amazing that when we
came to look
to
through putting some titles in. So we'll go here because there's nothing else on the screen at this point. Now to add in text and titles, so if we want to put up Bible references or even the whole Bible passage, if where they're preaching you want to refer to the things that they're talking about on the screen, what we can do is we can add this in with our in the effects library. So we could turn the media pool off here for a moment, and we'll use our effects library, and under effects we have titles, and there are a few different ways we can do titles, and for today we're just going to look at lower thirds. So we need to find a lower third, and they are a left lower third, a middle lower third, and a right lower third. I'm going to just take in fact let's take a left lower third, why not, and we're going to chuck that in here. Now to actually edit the easiest thing to do when it comes to editing these is to move your playhead somewhere into the middle of this clip, so we can just see exactly what it looks like on the screen. I'm just going to reduce the size of these tracks down a bit. They're as small as they go. Okay. Okay. Let's maybe turn off. Oh. There we go. So we move our playhead into the middle of our screen, and if we just enlarge that so we can see a little bit more. So right now we've got here where it just says title with a lower title underneath. Now to edit any of this stuff, what we need to do is to select it and then go to our inspector window on this side. Now we've pulled our titles in, we don't need the effects library on this side anymore, so we can move that one out of the way to give us again a bit more space. And we're going to change the title here just by clicking in that box and writing the text. So we're going to put a Bible reference in here, John 3:16. And you can say as soon as I start typing that in here, it's changed it over on the window over here. So we now have that in here. And the lower bit of this that says title down here, if you scroll down the box a bit further, here we have the option to add in a subtitle. So we could call it God's Love. God's Love. So now we have a title. If I can make it a bit bigger, we can see it. There we go. Title, John 3:16, God's Love. And we can, again, if I just move so we can see this bit, what we can do, again, if we can move our cursor to the end of the clip, we can actually stretch this out. And because this isn't a filmed video clip, we actually have the unlimited control basically on this, so we can make this as long or as short as we need it to be. We can extend it out both at the beginning and at the end to find the points where we want it. So there's obviously some other text on the screen there, so let's avoid that. We'll start where that's gone. And again, like with the video, if I can make myself a bit more space so we can see it. We do also get the ability to fade in and fade out. We might need to just make these tracks a bit bigger again though so we can see it. So top left hand corner we get our little blob, and we can put in 11 frames of fade in there. I think we're quite zoomed in here, we'll just zoom back out a little bit. So now
on the book of Joel. And I found it amazing that when we came to the present situation with the coronavirus and everything,
and fades out again at the end.
This material that I'd prepared,
so it's quite quick and easy to be able to add text on here, and you can do you can do all sorts of things with it. You can make it animated, make it move in and out, and all kinds of fun things with it. You can change the fonts, make it into a slightly different font, change the colors, all of that stuff is all in here, change the sizes. The other thing that you can also do right down at the very bottom is you have the background section here. And the background section, all these bits have toggle switches, you can turn them all on and off. The background section is turned on by default. The only reason you can't actually see it is because the box has 0 height. So to actually add that box in, you just start giving it some height and it will create that box around your text. Up to you whether you choose to use that. And again, you can change the colours of those boxes as well, so we can pick a green one to match his walls. Whatever you want to do with that, there's quite a lot of flexibility of what you want to do and how you want to do that, so you can adjust all of that and choose how opaque or not you make it. Lots of control as to what that's actually going to look like in the end. So we have some lower thirds. So we've looked at adding the tracks in, we've looked at crossfading between the two, we've looked at putting the text over the top. We can bring some more clips into here, so we could add in a let's put the communion clip on the end. If I can find the end, zoom out, see if I can find it. Long sermon. Right, so we find the end of the clip, and it looks again like we've got the image over the end of this, and let's turn our waveform on and just see where the speech ends. Yeah, so we've got quite a lot at the end of this that's just silence with the, zoom in a little bit, with the end of the talking. So there is the end of Stuart's message. So it fades to white almost instantly, and then we just start getting the logo coming in. So what we could do here actually is we could, yeah, let's do this. So we're going to find a point where, so we don't lose any of Stuart's speech, but it's all just white on the screen. We go as far with that as we can until we don't get any of the logo image. B to get my blade tool, chop that there. A to turn the blade tool off again. Select that section, delete it with a backspace. And I'm going to drop the communion in over the top. Now let's just have a quick look at the front end of the communion. So the communion starts off, the speech comes straight in from the beginning, but we have this logo image thing over the top, this screen image thing over the top. But that doesn't matter too much. What we're going to do is we're going to use our effects library to create a transition effect. So again, on the left hand side we have our effects library and we have video transitions. Now because the Stuart's clip faded to white, and because this one's already a colour and it's a lighter colour, we have here this one called Dip to Colour Cross Dissolve, and we can drag and drop this over, and if we put it over the top between the two clips, I need to zoom in a bit, I think it might be a bit too far out. Zoom in. And try again. Okay, not quite sure why that's not letting me drop that over those two. Okay, well we can pop it over that side, and that actually will probably work quite well because Stuart's clip fades to white anyway. So what that dip to colour effect is going to do, if we go into the inspector again on this side, you can choose what colour it will fade through before it gets to your, so as you move from one clip to another, what colour are you going to pass through to get from one to the other. Now because Stuart's clip ends in white, we want to leave this as white, so what will happen is we will get Stuart going to white.
We're going to share communion now together as a church.
Clip coming out of white, so those two things, it looks like it just fades through to white and then out of white again, out the other side. And again, that dip to colour can be quite a handy way to transition between clips, particularly if one of them does have a coloured screen on it. You can use your dip to colour to kind of pass through that colour as you go through. So there are effects transitions up here that you can use if you want to. I would say be light-handed with transition video effects because they can become a little bit a little bit cheesy looking if you use them too much and too often, so just be careful with them. But occasionally to put a dip to colour or something in there is quite nice, and it can be quite an effective way to move through from one to the other. Okay, now once we've got to this point, we're fairly happy with what we've done so far. We're going to save this, and you can either go File and Save Project. I'm doing this on a Mac at the minute, so Command S is my shortcut here, but there's probably a different shortcut on Windows. But we'll just save that project, and that's now saved. And I think for today we're going to stop at that point. So we've now got a point to where we've got all of our clips in place. We've looked at how we can move from one clip to another, and we have looked at how we can transition from one clip to another, and we've looked at the multiple tracks. Now there are a couple of things here which we're going to run into next time, so as I say, we're going to build on this each time. So having saved this now, we'll come back to this same project next time, and we'll carry on in this same project, and we'll keep building on this as we go through. So next time we'll start looking at some more advanced stuff. We maybe start looking at some color grading and audio settings and things. So we will pick this up next time and we'll look at some of that, but as I say, we might just find a bit of an issue with this, these two tracks being in the same place, but we'll come to that next time as to why. So for the time being, I think we've done as much as we can to this video. We've saved it, it's all good, and that is the kind of basic bare bones introduction to DaVinci Resolve and how to start using it, how to start putting videos into it, and how to start beginning to put those tracks and those clips all together to make your video up. So hopefully that's been helpful. Sorry about all the little glitches that we had along the way, but hopefully we got there in the end and we managed to make a reasonably successful video in the end. So thanks for watching, and next week we will pick this back up again and start to dig into some more advanced video stuff. So hopefully I will see you then. Take care, have a good week, I'll see you next week.